Professor Kum Kum Bhavnani, who comes from pretty far away, so thanks again for being with us today. Professor Bhavnani is a very special figure, very peculiar one, I would say. She is both a scholar and a filmmaker, addressing from both perspectives social issues, justice, and equity. So she did a number of documentaries. I will just mention a few. So she made The Shape of Water, Nothing Like Chocolate, Lutach, We Are Galapagos, and You Think You Can Dance. And there's another one in the making. This is a spoiler, so there's more to come. As a scholar, she took a honors degree at Bristol University in psychology with minors in sociology, politics, and philosophy, and then a master's at Nottingham University on child and educational psychology. She then earned a doctorate at King's College in Cambridge in social and political sciences. Then she moved on, went to the US, and she joined the University of California, Santa Barbara Department of Sociology, and that happened in July 1991. Among her many diverse, multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary interests, let me just recall cultural studies, international development, feminist studies, and anti-racist studies. At the University of California, Santa Barbara, she also served in many institutional jobs. Among them, she was also the Associate Vice Chancellor for Global Engagement since 2020, and that's actually how we met. She is now a distinguished Professor Emerita since July 2024, but she still serves there, also in very specific and I think relevant for the topic of this conference positions, especially as the Chancellor's Advisory Task Force on Childcare at Santa Barbara, and on the system-wide fossil-free task force there, which is developing plans for electrification of all University of California campuses. So given her very specific and at the same time wide expertise, many diverse and interesting perspectives, as both an academic scholar and a filmmaker, and her professional experience both in Europe, in the UK, and then in the US, we trust she's going to provide us with extremely interesting and, knowing her, challenging hints on how universities can be impactful on global scenarios, drivers of change, and being at the same time both excellent and inclusive, which is, I think, everything we aim at. So a talk is going to be on global shifts, innovative futures, shaping inclusive excellence, and I'm extremely glad and thankful to her, and I give the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raffaella, for a really lovely introduction. And I want to thank from the bottom of my heart many people here. Of course, Giovanni, but then also I want to thank Raffaella, Elena, Simona, the group at Unibo. I also want to thank Alberto, and I thank everyone for their patience with me. You will hear the stories from them if you ask about why I say that. But thank you, thank you, thank you. It is, of course, a huge privilege to be here. And I thank Coimbra and I thank Ludo for inviting me, Raffaella and Ludo for inviting me. So let me talk about what I'd like to say today. Global shifts, innovative futures, shaping inclusive excellence. It's almost banal these days to talk about the crises that surround us. The world is on fire, desertification, rising sea levels. We know that there's going to be a rise in temperature close to 4, if not 5 degrees. And yet, what is being considered is a 2-degree increase. That's considered to be the best case scenario. Wars such as the invasion of Ukraine, the genocide in Gaza, the development of far-right politics, movements all around the world. We're very familiar with this, of course. And of course, what's happening in the USA almost hourly. So as the professor said yesterday, the future ain't what it used to be. It is unpredictability that centers our lives. And it's impossible to say what will happen next. It is this unpredictability, as we all know, that has led to the dramatic increase in inequalities, be it climate or economic refugees, those who wish to imagine a different world for their physical bodies, those who protest and are denied fundamental civil liberties, something we never thought could be rolled back, and so on and so on. You know the story, for example, most recently of LA, but there are so many stories. What I am saying is that this unpredictability that has led to this frightening increase of inequality, something we know. But I don't, in this talk today, want to focus primarily on the horrors facing human beings. I don't want to focus on the horrors facing planet Earth. Not because I want to put my head in the sand like an ostrich, but I want to talk about what we can do, in fact, to create futures that may be possible. So even though human beings, we have created this world, and my generation, I'm ashamed to say, has made the world what it is, but we are also the potential architects for creating futures that are more sustainable for all of us. Could I have some water? Thank you. I just don't want to go and then trip and so on. You know how that goes. So what I'd like to do is focus on how to conceive of innovative futures. How can they be imagined, created? And this is where inclusive excellence enters the story. Thanks, Lorena. Thank you. What is inclusive excellence? Many definitions, we all think about them. What I mean by inclusive excellence is that inclusion is a requirement of excellence. This comes from Imperial College, but it's something that we all, we work with that idea, even if we couldn't put it that succinctly. And I must confess that I wouldn't have thought that Imperial College in London, which is a hub of science work, would have come up with the idea of inclusive excellence. Mea culpa for that. But let me not distract. What that says is that nothing is excellent unless there is inclusivity, intentional inclusivity. And I think that that excellence can be achieved when we achieve inclusive excellence. It's not just pursuing it, because we know the story. I tried to get all these people to apply, but no one applied, and so therefore we're stuck with the same old. So the point here is, what is excellence? I'm going from the horrors of the world to saying, what can be done? I don't know, but I'm going to throw out some ideas. And one of them is about how to think about excellence. Here's an example of inclusive excellence. Joy Bulamwini was a graduate student at MIT in the 2017, 2018. Perhaps some of you know the story. She saw that facial recognition algorithms, did not recognize people with darker skin. She could not be seen unless she wore a white mask. Now, she was in computer science and so on, and I'm not going to enter into the whole story, but you can look it up. What she was saying was that the software was useless because of the data set from which it had been derived. She's got a book out in 2023 called Power Shadows, again about how data sets are created. And she made a documentary, Coded Bias. So here is an example of inclusive excellence in that the facial recognition algorithms, fine, but they were actually rubbish, right? And you know the story of Google. You know many stories that abound about this sort of thing. So that's what inclusive excellence means, that we can actually make a better world if we are inclusive. We have to achieve it. And so today, with Coimbra, what can universities do? What can all of us within higher education do? I want to focus on 3 aspects of higher education as architects of innovative futures. I'll be using inclusive excellence as the framework, but let me give some examples and see what you think. And as Rafaela said, I don't mind arguing, I don't mind people disagreeing with me, and I'm more than happy to take on any challenges you throw at me, including the students who provided the questions. What are these 3 things? Students, how can higher education work with the constituencies inside our campus? I'm going to say whether, inside our institution. And what can HE, higher education, do with communities outside our institution? So it's students inside our institution, outside our institution. So let me look at students first. Students in anti-apartheid protests. You will know that from the 1960s, 1960s Sharpeville, 1970s Soweto, that students, especially in the UK and Europe, protested apartheid. They drew other students and non-students into the cause. There was boycotts of produce, stopping South Africa participating in sporting events, cultural and academic boycotts, and so we all became familiar with this idea. And the argument always was that it was the apartheid regime that had to be attacked, not necessarily individuals. Students developed encampments, ran onto rugby fields where the South African teams were playing. Of course, South Africa was banned from the Olympics until 1988, from 64 to 88. And we were always so grateful to our professors who stepped in to pay our fines or have us released on bail, because somehow they understood. So whilst we were doing things as students, of course, we were relying on our communities around us. It became clear, of course, that apartheid could not be overcome without a very concerted fight. The idea of encampments, the idea of boycotts, the determination to stop heinous forms of organizing a society have been drawn upon to undermine some of the horrors of the 21st century. Think about Occupy, which we sometimes forget, who developed some wonderful ways of holding meetings, sharing resources, developing encampments, and working on a model of trust. So Occupy, for example, was standing on the shoulders of other previous forms of protest and developing innovative futures, innovative possibilities for how to protest. Of course, we see that very recently. The encampments on college campuses in the last year has been something that is caused a lot of protest in the US in particular. It's a very particular sort of place there. And those encampments have been sometimes attacked with a deep and violent hatred that somehow mirrors the violence the students are protesting. Now, what I'm trying to say about talking about just anti-apartheid, Occupy, and of course more recent, you know the examples, it is instructors and others who have learned from students. So when we say, what shall we teach students, we must teach students. My argument would be that perhaps we also ought to work with students because they are often pushing universities. 68, Cornell, we can go on and on and on. It is students who push universities. And of course, I'm not saying that we agree with everything that is done. When students want to develop courses, of course it is our expertise or knowledge or experience, whatever it is, that's going to help shape that. But often students are the leaders, and so we look to them. Fossil fuel is a classic example. So basically, I'm saying that when we think about higher education, one constituency, students, is a group that we can learn from, all of us, rather than worry about how I can develop curricula to make sure that students understand about the planet. Let me see what students are doing and learn from them. Now, I realized this almost, 2 decades ago, I thought about this quite a lot. What can be learnt from people whom often we have all thought we should convey our knowledge to? And so I made a documentary called The Shape of Water in 2006, my very first documentary. And this documentary centered on women's love of life and love of political change. It focused on women creating social justice in Senegal by eliminating female genital mutilation. In Brazil, I worked with forest dwellers who were rubber tappers and were protecting the rainforest. In Jerusalem, I spent time with women in black, so we've got Senegal, FGM, Brazil, rainforest protection, Jerusalem, protesting the occupation, and I also worked with Mizrahi women who were demanding social justice for all Arab peoples, Jewish or not, living in Israel. So we've got Senegal, Brazil, Jerusalem, India. I filmed women who had created the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEVA, which is a cooperative trade union. At that time it was 700,000. And the women in SEVA, when they set it up, they challenged the harassment they faced when they tried to sell vegetables in the central market in Ahmedabad. So we've got Senegal, FGM, Brazil, rainforest, Jerusalem, protesting occupation. We've got India, SEVA, the largest trade union in the world, a cooperative, and SHAPE also tells the story of women saving seeds and women protesting the building of a dam, something that, again, water does organize our lives. So perhaps we can look at the first clip that I have from The Shape of Water. And this is a clip of about 50 seconds to just give you an idea of all the different constituencies.
The circumcisers who are getting up and walking from village to village and saying, we know that it is dangerous and we now know why, and therefore we must stop and we must stop together.
सेवा मदद एवी रीते करी के हमें पैसा pela बचे खातो खोला
derrubada e chegamos lá, encontramos os peões, né, conversamos com eles, já desceu motosserra da sede da fazenda, encontramos foi os policiais mandados do governo, logo deu ordem de prisão pra gente e nós pacificamente nós ia cantando o hino nacional, né?
I think the reason we're perceived as being so extremist is because...
Thank you. We can go on and watch the film. I can send you a link. It's very easy. But you see that there were different groups of people, of women in this case, finding solutions to how to live our lives, their lives. And this is women who people often think who live in the third world. I use the term third world. Of course, you may prefer to use global south, whatever. Of women in the third world who are often thought of as not having agency, as not doing anything. I will say that I developed this film because it was students in my classes. I teach about women in the third world, who I was telling them and I was giving them examples about Chipko and so on, and they said, but that's from the 1970s. And so what's the point? Anyway, I went and did research on more contemporary movements. And then when I was pulling an all-nighter to write the grant, to write a book, I just thought, this is a film. Let's try and make a film. As one filmmaker said to me, are you mad? You have no money, because I had no track record as a filmmaker. Academics making films make really, we all do. Maybe mine are also very boring. It's talking heads all the time. You're traveling all around the world, and you don't know anyone in film. And you don't speak all the languages. I did it because I decided if I could not make a film that I quite like, then I wouldn't make another. But I was determined to try. And that's what I'm trying to say for all of us about inclusive futures. Let's just try inclusive excellence, inclusive futures, whatever, let's all just keep trying. So that's students and how we can think about students within higher education. And indeed, we can think about people who we imagine as not being able to tackle the world. How can higher education, how can universities work with the constituencies inside our institutions? People can teach everyone many things. For example, food service workers can show us how to organize cafeterias, where to source healthy food, how to serve it so it is tempting, how not to encourage food wastage without being heavy-handed about it. Ground staff, the people who maintain the grounds, know so much about how to ensure what to plant, when to plant, how to use the water, and so on and so forth. So what I'm arguing here is that there are constituencies within higher education that we can, if we parse them out, there are ways of developing innovative futures. And of course, as faculty, we can create environments so that students enjoy their learning. They work hard, of course. And so one of the ideas I have is maybe every university has to have a course on filmmaking for every single student, a short 4-week course, because clearly visual ways of disseminating knowledge have gained credence and are much often more interesting for many different sorts of people, not always for academic work. I love academic work. What I'm saying is that when we look at constituencies inside HE, we could see how faculty and administrators and students, but how faculty and administrators can model how to work together. The UC is aiming to be fossil-free. We have that on our campus. And of course, one of the things we learned, our campus is considered a small campus for the University of California. There are 10 campuses. 25,000 students, which is capped because it's on the coast and there are regulations. And it's turned out that it's in fact cheaper for our campus to be fossil-free, because the infrastructure was laid in a long time ago, than it is to continue using, those horrible, horrible sources of energy. So again, that's the inclusive excellence. We get there. We can work with groups around the world, Scholars at Risk, Scholar Rescue Fund. Again, you will know some of this. For example, our campus has had people from Syria, from the Cameroon, and we now have a scholar from Gaza who is going to be here for a second year in the Department of Statistics. Global shifts leading to the imagining of innovative futures through the lens of inclusive excellence. But we can also work together on campuses by developing projects. Yes, fossil fuel, but when the pandemic hit, you will know this, I sat in meeting after meeting because of something I was doing. Researchers from around the world met at times that were inconvenient for many, to work out how to work together. There was no thought about, I must publish this. There was no thought about, I had this idea first. People just came together from around the world, all on Zoom. Heaven help us. You know what that was like. I was living in San Francisco then. We had librarians from the city who said, let us do something. Our libraries are closed. So they started to organize how to deal with the pandemic and how to deal with testing. We had, of course, people developing mass testing. I don't know if you remember, but in 2020, when it happened, people didn't know how to test more than one person at a time, 5 at the most on the tray. And everyone knew this was not adequate. And because people from all around the world, and I want to say including China, because of some of the feelings about China in the US, came together. So, people worked together to save and protect lives. And there were also unexpected connections. Unexpected connections of librarians, of social scientists working with medical researchers, saying, why is it that in the Mission district of San Francisco, which is a majority Latinx district, Why is it that the white people who live there not one person contracted COVID, and yet COVID was present for about 80% of the rest of the population? So all of us came together to think about these things. These unexpected connections that led to me to make another documentary about Galapagos. And I made the documentary because my daughter was going on a school trip. She came home one day and looked at me like this, Mom, the teacher says we can only go if we have one more person, looks at me, and they can be parents as well. I got it. So when we were flying over Galapagos, over the Santa Cruz Island, Serena looked out of the window and she said, Mom, I didn't realize people lived here. And I thought, I also didn't realize that. It's pathetic, but it didn't. We saw the houses. And so that stayed with me. And in 2018, I made a film about Galapagos, about unexpected connections. So thank you, Alberto, for this. 100 seconds, 90 seconds, something like that. Oh, this is the trailer for the film.
They are islands teeming with wildlife, stunning diversity, and natural wonders.
People think of the Galapagos and they think of iguanas, colorful crabs, and the sea lions. But they don't realize that there are people there in the Galapagos.
Hola, mi vecino. Vivo en el barrio Bellavita, Galápagos.
It's a community where scarcity is everywhere.
There is no fresh water. Most of the food comes from the mainland.
And adaptation is everything.
The main source of economy is the tourism business.
This is my greenhouse. Everything is for our consumption.
And if they don't find a way to survive,
Bueno, mi vida mía ha sido muy complicada, entonces no me alcanza hasta que le paguen a mi esposo, no me alcanza el dinero.
neither will the Galapagos.
Please don't do this. No, pero es que es prohibido hacer eso. We need to keep the balance with the ecosystem.
It's a mixture of people all living together.
Que se hizo el primer aeropuerto ecológico a nivel mundial.
If we're really serious about charting a sustainable future for a place like Galapagos, we need to act now.
We are. We are Galapagos.
Unexpected connections, unexpected relationships, all sorts of things. Could you take the podium down just a little bit? So, talk to our students, what can we do inside our campuses, but then of course we think about these unexpected connections. You all will know examples, I don't need to, well, I'm happy to give you some from my experience if you wish. But what can we do with communities outside, which is the key, of course, for the meeting today, for Coimbra, since the declarations. So let me just very quickly tell you a couple of things. I don't know if you know about Pugwash. Pugwash is an organization of scientists who work to make the world free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. They believe in dialogue. During the Cold War, scientists from England were secretly meeting with scientists in Russia, in the Soviet Union then, to talk about this. This is how we can work. We can work with constituencies outside our campuses, of course, but let's also take a risk in doing some of that. Let's do that. Pugwash won the Nobel Peace Prize in, 1995, a long time ago. But the idea of scientists coming together, we look at the world now, perhaps we all can work with people in Brazil, in Hungary, in India, these places where the right wing has taken hold. Of course, in Italy, you're familiar with that. And I am very familiar with it, as you all know. So this is the sort of thing we can do with constituencies. Of course, we can work within our immediate communities, our local local authorities and so on. But I'm trying to sort of just give other ideas and see if you agree with me. But we can also work in different ways. And so I want to show an extract from my film, Nothing Like Chocolate. It's just the first, I don't know, minute, something like that, of it, where again, the research has come together to try to, you know, corny as it is, grandiose as it sounds, to try to make a better world. It's called Nothing Like Chocolate.
Who doesn't love chocolate? But there's more to this decadent product than we know. Most of us eat industrial chocolate produced by large chocolate companies who get their cocoa beans from all over the world. Much of this cocoa comes from Ivory Coast in West Africa, where there is a history of using child slave labor to harvest the beans. This cloud of child slavery has haunted the chocolate industry for many decades. But in the Caribbean, on the island of Grenada, the chocolate revolution has begun.
Download this revolution. I want all my brothers and my sisters to say yeah.
And so on. Documentaries don't have to be that very serious, quiet look, although sadly mine often are. So what I've really been arguing is that we must get involved politically. Politics is about changing the world. And film is a form of politics. What forms of politics can move us towards a more just world? Alvin Ailey said, "Dance is for everybody." I believe that dance came from the people, and it should always be delivered back to the people. Dancing is hard work. It is the way by which people learn subtle moves and thoughts. It's demanding. It's about passion. Film, dancing, passion. Innovative futures, inclusive excellence. In the present era, we see these realignments that I've touched on, we're familiar with. And it is clear that our lives are replete, are full of contradictions. In rural, there's Black Lives Matter and so on, and then more recently in rural Bangladesh, women's economic independence appears to be possible only through obtaining bank loans that require them to make handicrafts to sell to tourists. Lesbian and gay groups are subject to increasing restrictions and monitoring. In Southeast Asia, throughout the Americas, as well as in Europe, sex work has become a site for discussion about the interconnections between women's work, women's agency in doing this work, tourism, militarism, migration, and so on. I would like to show a little extract from my most recent film. When I say my most recent, it hasn't come out. I've been working on it while I've been here. So there are many glitches. But let's just look at
we struggle with social justice.
Okay, 1 second.
And this is a life and death matter.
Thank you. Okay, I had forgotten that there is shape. Let's just look at this part from Shape of Water, okay? And then we can see if there's time to look at a couple of minutes of the newest film. So let's just think about politics. What can move us? What can make it possible to change the world? Alberto, is it possible to go back very slightly, just because what Vandana Shiva says is, doesn't matter if you can't, it's not, you know. Great, perfect. Thank you.
With social justice struggle.
And this is a life and death matter, learning how to be citizens of the earth, not just consumers in a global marketplace. But there is another globalization that is at work, and that is the globalization of citizens connecting to each other. It is a people's globalization, a globalization of resistance. It is the women who are in the forefront, and they are the ones who have to pay the price for the destruction of life and life support systems. But also because they are part of another economy, another world, another thinking which puts life for profits.
Thank you. Raphael has been very fierce with me on time. 30 more seconds. If you noticed, I didn't look at her because she was going to give me all the 5 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Best not to look. Borrowing from two writers, I see the world as, quote, stooping to pick up the golden apples dropped from the tree of industry, and to barter truth, love, and honor for traffic in wool, beetroot sugar, and potato spirits. I'd like to suggest that all of us in higher education and beyond, of course, bring our minds to bear to ensure that truth, love, and honor do not continue to be bartered. Is it possible to dance the passionate dance of political change, innovative futures for social justice? We urgently need to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a stimulating and challenging, deep and rich speech. Thank you so much. Discussion time here, so we're going to start with the questions from two of our students ambassadors. And let me just take this opportunity also to thank them. We've got a pretty rich community of international students right now. They are 14% of our 97,000 students. They come from 160 different countries, so we are a very international community. I'm very glad it is the case. And student ambassadors are represented here today, and they really provide us with a, I would say, daily contact point with our international community. So a few questions are going to be raised by Asvaria Varadarajan from the Master in Health Economics, Management and Policy. Thank you for being with us. And then after her, we're going to have Onei Kachi, also known for friends as Kizito, from the Master in Pharmaceutical Biotechnology. So thank you both for being with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm a big fan of your works, and thank you so much for letting me raise my question. After I listened to your speech, I would like to ask you, if we succeed in shaping a future defined by inclusive excellence, what do you imagine that the world might look like, say, by 2050? What are the indicators that we should be striving for now?
What are the indicators we should be striving for a possible world by 2050? I don't know. I don't know. In fact, I look to you. As I said, I feel that my generation, not everyone, I don't know, but may have let the world down. We didn't think we were. We thought the revolution was 10 years away, and how wrong we were, or the very different sort of revolution. So I don't know what it might look like. What do you think it might look like? What does Kizito think what it might look? What do you think it might look like if we have a just world?
Somewhere with more justice, where people can grow, where you don't have to think a lot more about your ethnicity, where you're from. You just have the freedom to grow as you want, dream what you want, and a world that is more ecological, which is more environment friendly, where people can breathe, move around freely. There is no labels or status. People are just people, and they can be what they dream to be, is what I imagine to be like a inclusive future. And a place where people are not deprived of opportunities or their own agencies, that women have the freedom that they dream of now. At least I hope by 2050 we have more freedom than we have now.
Yeah. See, you know it. You don't need anything from me. You all know it. Take us there.
Thank you, Professor Kum Kum Bhavnani, for the great insight from your presentation.
My first question is on filmmaking. As a filmmaker with deep experience in storytelling, what advice do you have for students like myself who hopes to use media as a tool for amplifying marginalized voices? Specifically, like, you know, how can we immerse ourselves in our story such that we ensure that we don't get lost in the nuances of the story and the complexities of it, but we will still be able to have that narrative choice and ensure that our story is both intentional, responsible, and ethically guided.
And what was the last word?
Ethically guided.
I don't know. What advice do you have? But I won't just keep saying I don't know and I'll throw it back to you. But you all know. You know about storytelling. We know about, well, I've had to learn about filmmaking. And I think it is what is the story. And to be frank, there are different ways to make films. It's just my research. I'm an ethnographer, that's the work I love doing. That's why I love film. So the first film, I had done all this research on these different groups. I went to capture that and put it onto film to amplify voices, right? But also so that women's south to south, third world to third world could see what others were doing, even if they didn't live in Brazil, in Senegal, etc., etc. So that's one way to do film. Chocolate was a very different. I didn't know. I read just as The Shape came out, I read about children being trafficked to harvest cocoa. In Ivory Coast, which produces 40% of the world's chocolate. And I was shocked because I thought I should have known about this. I ought to have known about this. This was my work. And so on and so on. And then, like today, my idea is that I don't want to focus on the difficulties that we are facing. That doesn't mean that others shouldn't. No. It's someone else's job, I want to stand on their shoulders, and then I want to say, how can we imagine this? So with chocolate, I was looking for someone who was making chocolate ethically. And this was in 2008, 2009. And I couldn't find a woman, but that's just an aside, who was a woman chocolatier. Anyway, I found Mort Green in Grenada, anarchist, pretty eccentric, but he had gone to Grenada for various reasons, and now there was a cooperative that produced chocolate. In the days before we talked about from bean to bar, he was doing from tree to bar, and so on. And it was a cooperative, blah, 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 blah. So that story was something that I realized I wanted to tell, but I didn't know it when I went in. I had no idea. I just knew Mort was about the only person who responded to me. So off I went to meet him and decided, let me see what to do. So I think that the story emerges. Well, we know this in ethnography. My first book was called Talking Politics. And the story emerged because the 16-year-olds told me what their lives were like. They weren't politically apathetic. They weren't politically militant. It was two ends of the thing. They were talked about. Power and inequality. So how do we get stories? We try to get stories from what is being said around us. Of course, you all know that. Alberto, I don't know if you can show this last clip. This is the film it's 2 minutes, I'll say, because we'll stop in the middle, straight after the card, not the full thing. This is the introduction that we created 24 hours ago. Let me see if it works on a big screen. I've only been watching it on the computer, so there we go. Okay, before you do that, sorry. The film is about Tibetan Buddhists living in exile in northern India. And it focuses on I finally got to it. It focuses on 3 monastics who are there.
I liked it.
Yeah, that's it. Great.
I like to laugh. Everybody says that, I kind of, when the first person approached me, they always say, I look very rude. Yeah, but when they get to know me, then they know me that I'm a very laughable person. I'm a very jolly person. When I first came here, I was the only one who's very young. I was 13 years old, but I was very young. I'm about to choose a very different path. I want to be a teacher, science teacher. This near go yura, Mado Dakalore, Karina Kudu.
Tane ta khande de changma cha chawa da tane to lo ya porque zen shan do zuke tane ta hila they're saying when I was young in school I was like a little bit tough boy, so from my same ages I beat everyone.
So this was, I mean, we had a focus group last week, and there's nothing like having a focus group to make you feel bad. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It really helped me in thinking about what to do with the film, because it was a bit of a mess. No story, no clear story in it. Go for it, Acharya.
One more question.
Go for it.
So, how has your conversation with students influenced your understanding of this inclusive excellence and innovation? And also, when you compare the future generation and the current generation of students and the students of the previous generation, what pointers would you like to give us, like to improve ourselves as students to change the world?
I don't know what pointers to give. In fact, Lobsang in this film says at one point, because they're studying science, and she says, the best thing to say when anyone asks you a question is to say, I don't know. That's it, right? So I don't know, but I do think there are things that I would like to think about, which is, I say to some of the students I work with, I say, don't tell your parents. I said that. Remember, I'm working in the US, so it's very different. And I said, you don't need to settle down. They say, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I said, no, you don't need to. Just go, find, work, earn money, leave a job after a year. If it doesn't suit you, try something else. Just keep going. Try it, try it, try it. And of course, my feeling is that you have to do things that you hope will make the world better. But, that's corny, that's cheesy. So I don't know what pointers I would give, and what have I learned? I've learned enormous things. I mean, the students, they say things when I talk like this in class, they go, you can't believe that, Professor Bhavnani, Yes, I can, let's talk about it, let's go for it. So I've learned a lot from them about how to teach, of course. We did one year, I went into this class, 100 students, this is a standard for our campus and for sociology department I'm in. 100 students in the class, horrible room. And I'd been teaching for 4 or 5 weeks, and I just walked in and I said, so, who wants to do an alternative fashion show instead of a final paper for the class? Well, of course, 40 hands went up. And then someone said, what is an alternative fashion show? No idea. No idea. Go for it. And they produced an event that was reported in Time. They did poetry, they did dance, they looked at how clothes are made, but they did it through these very different cultural and scientific ways. And at the end, they had a fashion show, an alternative fashion show. And so people would come forward, and the narrator would say, Kum Kum is wearing a shirt that she bought from the second-hand shop here. It was made ethically by blah, 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 you know? And so they had more. So this is what I've learned, that the creativity is there if only I will stop being arrogant and thinking I know what to do. So that's what I've learned. I got to take it as it comes.
Thank you.
Okay, my second question. So there are some critics, that argue that diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives that they compromise meritocracy.
They compromise what?
Meritocracy. Yeah, the very foundation upon which our modern society is built. So they contend that if we prioritize inclusivity, that we risk overlooking individual talents and achievements. So what would be your response to this ideology?
I don't know, because, thank you, Lobsang. I think DEI is something that, in the US, yes, it has become something. When I was in England, I worked a little bit in producing anti-racist materials with the Open University, and as a result, there was lots of stuff, and that was a long time ago, but it's become a sort of badge, sometimes it's considered a badge of honor, it's considered whatever, the race relations industry, these arguments about DEI. So I prefer not to use DEI, I've never done it, when people have asked me, I've just stayed away from it, and yet, all my life, I have fought and said, no, we cannot have this group of people applying for the job because they're all going to look like us, whoever gets the job. So we have to go further, we have to push. And I've done that, and I think we have to be really careful that when people like us, people of color, get positions, that people cannot say that it's because of my skin color that I got it, I refuse that and I fight that. But I also don't want to say that someone who's white shouldn't get the job. Absolutely not, I'm some of my best friends are white. You get that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying DEI can be something that's a bit too, I don't know, it's not a phrase, I call it inclusive excellence. I mean, forget Donald Trump and his crowd who want to get rid of DEI. Yes, I understand, but I prefer something that just talks about how do we become excellent.
Thank you so much. A big thank to the Students' Ambassador. You can't leave yet, because now we're going to have some questions from the wide audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charvia. Thank you, Kizito.
Good morning, Ludovic Tilly, University of Poitiers. Well, first, thank you so much, Kum Kum, for keeping our eyes and minds open, really. That's so important. I wanted maybe to reflect a bit further on this concept of inclusive excellence. Because, well, let's be frank, in the Coimbra Group, we usually hear, and myself, I do participate as well to this trend, that we like to say we are a group of excellent universities. But actually, shouldn't we now not even use the word inclusive excellence, but rather strive for being good universities or just universities, and just decide that we drop the word excellence for all the negative content it has?
Hard one. Yes, but also I'm very aware, again, this may be particular to the US, of the importance of rankings and excellence and, where papers are published and all that sort of stuff. So how do we deal with that concept? I think it's hard to say to get rid of it, but I think we can all as universities have a mission statement that talks about excellence. Don't let anyone get us for not being excellent, but then says excellence is about justice or whatever. When I was doing a bit of work for this talk, some of the stuff I read is fabulous. But one of the things I read was that in Cornell, which in '68, the black students had a big sit-in and so on, a huge thing. Cornell is considered an excellent university, Ivy League. The number of black students it has is 5.9%. This is like last year or something, very recently. And that's the best amongst the Ivy Leagues. That's the highest percentage. So, yes, Cornell might be excellent, but perhaps it can want to do other things. So that's what I think. I would keep the word excellence, in other words.